Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. It's the show that is once again offering Greg Berhalter for a nominal fee. We can set your lineups and make your subs, I promise, and we'll do a really, really good job. Money back guaranteed. It's Tim and John back to talk about the win that wasn't and the game that will be. I don't think you liked me saying that, Tim, but I think we do a good job.
I have no idea why you think that that's something that somebody should get paid for. I mean, honestly, like it's one of those things.
Because I need to support my family.
Okay, so look, some teams don't really share lineup information far enough in advance to make it to like the TV production teams and the radio. Like in the press box, we just never really get it early. And the New York Red Bulls are not one of those teams. They gave their lineups to the people in the Fire press corps whose job it is to like put stuff like that out in the statistics and stuff like that at the last possible second. They didn't give it to the media, like the broadcast media ahead of time. And like it's useful for them to be able to know how to talk about the game and like what the formation is and stuff like that when they're not already recording a preview show for stuff like radio where you're doing that. Red Bulls did none of that. So, that to hide all of that secret information. And it's like, dude, anybody that has watched your team can probably get 9 of the 11 right, like sight unseen with no question. You know what I mean? And like the lineup preview that I had in my preview, I had Mboazi starting instead of Waterman, and like that was the only difference. And like,
Completely unrelated point. I saw a video, and I think you'll get a kick out of this. Sorry to all the people listening. I'm just doing bits with Tim on the air. One of those people who it's like not a soccer content creator. Clearly, he's just like goes to sports games and talks to people. He's like, name a player for New York Red Bull whose name starts with J. And this little 6-year-old knowing ball is like, well, Julian Hall, of course. And this guy has the audacity, the gall to say, what about Justin Che? Like, brother, what is this? Who is answering that way?
Right. Yeah. Seriously. Man. And
totally
you know what?
Nonsense.
Justin Che is not the heir apparent to Robert Lewandowski on the Polish national team. So
okay, we'll get there. Let's talk the bits of news we have to talk to before we get to that. First and foremost, Tim, it's good to have you back. We if you missed the last episode, we had Alex Campbell of CHGO Fire join as Tim had to miss out. So special thanks again to Alex for coming on. Also mentioning that because he announced today he's got some Substack content coming out surrounding the World Cup. So if you haven't, go ahead and subscribe. It's just Alex Campbell, spelled as it sounds, .substack.com. Alex is a good dude. Excited to see what he's got cooking over there. So go give that a subscription if you haven't already. Now, the less exciting, then the more exciting, then maybe the most interesting. Fire falling 3-1 to New York Red Bull in a game that I know you said 5 goals is a thumping, Tim. That felt like a thumping. We'll talk about it more in a sec here. The one positive, that lone goal does mean Hugo Kuipers is alone atop the Golden Boot leaderboard, as questionable as the decision to give him the goal may have been. And I think where we kick... Go ahead.
Okay, you know what? Look, Fire fans have sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly complained about like the league being against them and stuff like that. I think mostly not correctly, but look, this is one of those things. If you're not one of the Golden Boot leaders and they give you the goal, and maybe they shouldn't have, that gets called back. But if you are one of the Golden Boot leaders, and it's a stat that they've already put out on socials, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if there wasn't a call be like, no, just let it be. Let it be.
I don't remember if it was you or somebody else who sent me a text like, I don't know if you guys noticed, they actually had it credited to Hugo, then it was an own goal, then it was back to Hugo. And in that little stretch of time, MLS had posted, Hugo Kuipers sits alone atop the Golden Boot leaderboard. I was like, oh, well, might be that simple, actually. But hey, we'll take it.
And then somebody in headquarters made a decision, and then, somebody in the room, putting the stats in made a decision, and then somebody in headquarters was like, no. We need this story. The Fire need this juice right now. And look, that was the only moment of, like, real joy in that game.
I'll say as somebody who watched it happen, there was not a lot of joy in that moment. It was more like, oh, cool, like,
well,
yay.
Cade Cowell celebrated a lot, but I mean, Cade Cowell is just a guy that seems prone to doing that, whether or not he's got cause.
Cade Cowell seems like the kind of guy who just has to celebrate everything he can at this point,
he's like a Marvel villain, dude. I can't fully explain it. I know his Marvel Knight, but it's like just so much about him. He just looks like he is animated. Um,
He strikes me as like if John Tolkien was a brunette. You know what I mean?
well, Kate Cowles
Same
had
vibes.
blonde hair in the past. Not naturally,
Sure,
but
sure. Exactly. All right. Let's talk about actual soccer related things. The interesting bit of news, we discussed it briefly, or Alex and I did. Tim had a little bit of semi reporting, semi churning the rumor mills last week, just kind of floating out the idea that Robert Lewandowski to Chicago Fire was not as dead as people thought it was. Then it comes out this week. Robert Lewandowski expecting to leave Barcelona, and the Fire are once again ready and willing to offer a deal that could be worth up to, if not past, 20 million US dollar roonies. Tim, anything you want to add reporting wise? Any thoughts you may want to share? The more this becomes real, I think the more people are actually flushing out their opinions on it.
so this is one of those things where it becomes a question of like who actually reads the full story versus just like reads the tweet and then goes on, right? Um, the story from Paul Tenori and Tom Bogert clearly said that the interest had cooled, but then when you actually look at what the story said, they never said it was off. They never said it. It just clearly was like, look, that there were no indications that Lewandowski was really ready to move to Chicago. They had serious talks in the past, and he wasn't ready to say yes. And so, look, Greg Berhalter's not going to be like sitting by the phone and crying, like scratching a picture of Lewandowski. Like, why won't he call? He's like, the team is going to come up with other transfer targets this summer, right? And I don't think any of that's a surprise. And then reporting again out of Barcelona, which he's there, but when they're reporting about what it is the Fire have offered, I think you have to start questioning, okay, where are your sources? And if you piece it together, I think it's pretty obvious where the sources are, and they're not from somebody that would be in a position to know what the Fire are offering directly, and a first-hand source at least. And so, look, the story that came out from that Barcelona publication, it's coming out as part of a narrative. Um, there's games that are being played, and that's part of it. And I think, you should be wise to asking what exactly is happening. Having said that, I do think that the Fire are feeling more optimistic that there could be a potential deal than they had previously. But as with all this, look, whatever the reporting was at any stage of it, if Lewandowski picked up the phone and called, the Fire headquarters, like somebody picks up and they get Greg on the horn pretty quick. Like it's that simple, and it's like always going to be that simple. He could have said, "It's off. I don't really want to go to Chicago," and then a day, a week, a month, or a year later, because there have been talks for several years, he picks up the phone again and you still answer, because that's the kind of player he is, and that's the accomplishment he's had, and that's what the commercial potential he could have in Chicago.
Yeah, look, and I think maybe the important thing to hammer home on this, and we'll talk, I think, more about it later on as we talk about what's kind of going wrong right now, is like somebody said, I think I've been pretty vocally against this. Tim, I think you would probably fall into that camp too, maybe more eloquently than I have been, but nonetheless. And somebody kind of threw around like it's Messi, it's Ronaldo, and then it's Lewandowski when you talk about like goal scoring, right? And that is true. I mean, there's a sizable gap, and those guys both do more than just score goals, but that is true. And when you're talking about that quality of player, to your point, Tim, the phone's going to ring and somebody's going to answer it. There's probably there's a dedicated red and white phone sitting on Greg Berhalter's desk, and it's just a direct line to Robert Lewandowski, just in case he ever wants to call. Now it's interesting. We'll talk. Look, as the World Cup goes on, Robert Lewandowski not playing in the World Cup, right? So he's not exactly going to be preoccupied this summer. He's going to have all the time in the world to make a decision. And in a weird way, there's no reporting or facts. That's not my job here. I feel like an answer on this may come sooner than we expect, but I'm just guessing.
It's possible, or it may not. Like I said, there's certainly going to be other clubs out there in the world that are interested in the services. Now, putting that number out, I think, was clearly a strategic move by people, because it sets the bar for someone. Now, look, I think if a club that had made it into the Champions League for next season, right? So they know they're going to be there. If they offered Lewandowski money, I don't think it has to be $20 million to get him to say yes. I mean, like, that's just the reality of the situation. And that's what the Fire encountered last year with Kevin De Bruyne, right? I mean, and that was a connection that he had to a city in a country where, like a city he already had home. But it's hard to get guys to turn down that opportunity. And I think that that's still the reality of the Fire. And I guess the biggest change is just for things much more important than anything we ever talk about. The appeal of going to Saudi Arabia has probably decreased a lot for a lot of people. And I'm assuming that Lewandowski's in that camp, although I have no inside information on that.
I mean, I can't imagine there's anybody out there, like even one guy who's been tied to it quite a bit, like Mohamed Salah, right? Like I cannot imagine even his interest hasn't waned, right? Like it's a very difficult time for anybody to be in that region of the world, much less you have a lot of money and can be anywhere you want, right? Or with children, right? With young kids. Anywho, that's a whole other bag of worms that we don't ever talk about except for a throwaway line here or there. Let's talk about what happened this weekend, and that is Michael Bradley and his baby Bulls coming into Chicago and just, man, it was a beatdown. That did not feel like a game the Fire were in from that first goal on. You may disagree with me. I'm okay with us disagreeing about that. Look, the headline I have here was, "Oh, Andre Franco, where art thou? Wherefore art thou, Andre Franco?" Look, it was another game where Joe Lowry's patented horseshoe of depression came back out. The Fire, despite 14 shots, only landing 4 on target, and by Fatmob's references, they missed all 4 of their big chances. It was just a disappointing finishing day for the Fire.
Now, by Opta's stats, the Fire had 16 shots and 12 on target. But either way, right? I mean, it's not that the number of shots that were on target. I think it's the number that were good quality shots, and there weren't enough of them. Like they were not high quality chances either way. And look, you said it was a beatdown. I don't honestly feel like it was a beatdown. I don't think the Red Bulls, like, they should get full credit for the win. They fixed things defensively they haven't been able to fix previously. It turns out playing 2 center backs helps you win game, like not get scored against, as opposed to playing a center back and a guy that's playing at a center back spot. Who would have guessed? But look, they deserve the win, but I think that the Fire just didn't show up to play. I'm on both sides of the ball. The passes were not there on offense. That they weren't doing enough with the possession. They had more of the ball. They had the possession. They weren't doing enough with it, and they were just leaving huge pockets of space open defensively and not closing guys down. I mean, Greg called out on the first Red Bulls goal, which really did change the tone of the match entirely, right? You go in 0-0 at half, and it's like not exactly like the SKC game, because the Red Bulls are a team that doesn't feel like they should be relegated out of professional soccer, not just the top flight. But like, it felt like it could have been a game like that, where the dam was going to break, the Fire continued to press, and eventually the goals would come even if the Fire weren't generating a ton of chances. The goal changed the game, and after that, the Fire never really were able to get a hold of it. And I think the frustrating thing is just, Greg called out how much space the Fire left on that goal, like just not defending in the box, like leaving not just a little bit of space, but he said at the time 3 yards. I think it could have been more than 3, of a guy in the box with the ball. Like, how do you do that?
I mean, so here's the thing. I heard that piece from Berhalter, and I went back and I watched the goal again because I was in the stadium, so it's different, right? You don't get quite the view. And I got to be honest, yes, he left him space. I got to be honest with you, I did not feel it was that egregious. I really didn't. That first goal, like, Jonathan Dean leaves him some space to be able to get, that's still just an incredible shot. Like, that is truly, watching that back, my take was, hey, that's a hell of a finish. Like, that was a beautiful shot put in from Ruvalcaba, and like, that's life. You're going to get beat like that sometimes. And he could have closed him out, but with how Jack Elliott and Joel Waterman are playing, they're getting burned every which way. Like, if Jonathan Dean gets beat off the dribble out there, you're giving up a higher percentage chance.
It's not just that. No, it's not just that, right? Like, the Red Bulls started with the ball in their own half. They built out of possession, like, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
And it was a full passing sequence. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't the first guy that
you're talking start to finish.
Yeah, it was a start to finish game. It was not like they had several passes they strung together in the, like, final third. Like, they had, I mean, all of it was just, look, it just wasn't good enough from the Fire on that goal. And then I think that was not the story against Cincinnati. Was like the Fire failed in a couple key moments, and those moments came back to bite them. The Fire, like the key moments in this game, were representative of the way the game was being played.
Well, and that just feels like such a common theme at this point, right? And you know, the main question I had to ask here, right, was like, what's missing? Because what we've been saying for weeks at this point in terms of the attack has been, well, you don't really have a creative force in the middle of the field. You're missing Andre Franco. Brian Gutierrez is, you know, now playing for Chivas. Like, you don't have anybody to really make the center of the field dangerous, which means you're just playing to the corners, and there's only so much that can be created from there. And that I still think rang true in this game. There was kind of this... Tim, I'm failing to get to my point here. It feels like creativity in general is lacking.
But there wasn't.
It's not necessarily
right.
just the middle.
Part of that's a byproduct of playing at the 4-4-2, right? Because like the Red Bulls were lined up at 4-1-4-1. They actually had two real center backs and two fullbacks in this one. Both the fullbacks I thought had pretty good games. That was Dylan Neal. I kept on I was like, as I'm writing my copy like during the game, I'm like, I'm gonna write Sean. I'm gonna have to backspace and type in Dylan. Didn't do it then. I just did it now. So, hey. Matthew Dos Santos, who I've seen in several different sources, quote, like called Mark Dos Santos, which is like, no, that's a different Dos Santos. And as far as I know, they're not related. But in the 4-1-4, like the Fire just didn't have, in a 4-4-2 against the Red Bulls 4-1-4-1, Edri Mehmeti was kind of given a ton of space in the like center of the central channel in the pitch, and the Fire just didn't have anyone around him because the two midfielders, like the second four and like the midfield four, the Fire were essentially playing two wingers, and then you know Jade Avila and Anton Teleotros, and they had to cover a lot more ground than what the Red Bulls had to cover, and that gave Mehmeti space to operate. I thought Mehmeti had a good game, but like another, you know, teenager that we hadn't thought about before this year that now we're thinking about, and helped, you know, set up Forsberg a couple of times further up the pitch and, you know, on chances, you know, didn't become a goal for him, but he had an assist, I believe, on that first one with the key pass. Yeah. Or sorry, the actual assist then.
Does it feel like to you, look, so I flash back a little bit. The very first game of Greg Berhalter's tenure, facing Columbus Crew. You go up 2-0 early, you end up losing that game. Nobody really thought much of it at the time. Like, it sucks, but that's life. I have a very distinct memory of somebody turning to me where I was watching the game and saying, hey, this was my biggest concern about Greg Berhalter, is his inability to adjust inside of matches. And it feels like, again, Michael Bradley made changes. Michael Bradley coached his team up at halftime, and Michael Bradley's team played better for the large majority of the game. And all credit in the world to Michael Bradley, by the way. I mean, like, I feel like I'm as skeptical as you can be about him. Is a good game. He's doing a good-ish job so far. It feels like we kind of keep having this conversation about Greg Berhalter, and it comes out through the substitutions. Once again, like the early sub for Pouso Ditajan, the later subs were delayed because of the penalty, but still you're talking like 75th minute when he tried to bring them on. Like, it feels like it's not just the substitutions, it's a lack of adjustment, right?
So, yeah,
because the shape didn't change after the substitutions either, just for the reference.
They sort of did. It sort of did over time, right? I mean, certainly, you know, because when Puso came on for Bamba, he didn't play on the wing quite the same way, and I feel like you saw Marin kind of like dropping deeper more at that point, and you know, I think that was the idea. I don't think it was really super effective. I mean, you know, it kind of put Marin in a little bit more of the 10 role, which we did talk about seeing on the pod. Maybe doing it in game like that wasn't the best way to happen, especially because it didn't happen at the start of a half. Look, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I will say the Red Bulls were ahead by the time that, like, before they made adjustments. And it's a lot easier to make adjustments when you're up 1-0. Now, having said that, you can also make the case that, like, if you're up 1-0, it's not like you're like the game's out of hand. Like, that's also a time when you can say, well, it's time for us to keep our foot on the same pedal. And I can respect both in different situations, not to get into that too much. But it wasn't like the substitutions changed the way that the game was going. It's that the game was going a certain way by the time the subs came on for the Red Bulls, and the Fire didn't make subs that changed it. Having said that, I don't really know. Look, there's subs that would have come on and did. I think like Puso had a really good moment. Another really great dribbling moment, like past two guys into the box. And if it wasn't for Dylan Nealis' amazing goal line clearance,
Yeah,
it would have been a goal. It would have been, and it would have been a
that
goal
was their
that, like,
only shot blocked of the game, by the way.
And it would have been a goal that everyone around the league would have seen because of how much of a highlight reel moment that was, of like dribbling past two guys, including Robert Voloder, who's been a pretty good center back this year. It's just he's been the only one a lot of the time, and so he brought energy. I don't think that he was a guy that you're going to rely to come on and change the structure of the game. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a player in that really had all of that skill. Now look, do I think that Sergio Orahel would have maybe been an option worth trying? Yes, but only if you were willing to like throw in the towel and say that like what you had clearly was not going to work. And it probably would have been Sergio for Marin, and like I'm like, like Marin didn't have the best game.
Okay. Can I pause slightly, because you kind of said it there, and just a peek behind the curtain. You said it on the pod too. One of the things we talk about sometimes when I say, gosh, I wish this would have happened or that would have happened, you've given the feedback occasionally of, I don't know that changes the game, right? Like, I don't know that bringing on a sub in the making wholesale changes in the 60th minute is going to change the outcome of this game.
Well, and I think the subs that are on the bench, I'm not saying that doing it with subs can't. Right.
Yes. In the Fire situation, right? And I think my biggest piece of pushback on that is you're allowed to say that if you've tried it. And Greg Berhalter, God love him, hasn't tried it. And to that end, he hasn't tried playing Sergio Orahel for real minutes. He hasn't really tried playing a 4-3-3 of Sergio Orahel, Mauricio Pineda, and Anton Saletros. And we talked about early in the year, maybe just get your best 11 players on the field, see what happens. And it worked for a few weeks, right? The Fire won some games. They had some nice moments, getting kind of this weird 4-4-2, Marin Haile Selassie playing a few different roles. And look, the tape's out. You can't beat it against a low block. It's just not going to work unless you score first. And look, if you can score first, great. But like, and it's just getting to the point here of like, this is a common theme. Teams have figured out how to stop what you're doing. And yeah, you don't have your full deck of cards. Maybe the answer is you just need to change it up a little bit. Right? Maybe
and look,
you don't need maybe you don't need a 10 out of 10 in the middle. Maybe you need a 6 and a 5, right? And that's 11 out of 10. It's not as good on the whole, but it's better than what you're getting. You know what I mean? Like, why do we like him? Because he gets on base, Tim. That would moneyball your midfield a little bit. I'm tired of looking at the same thing and then being like, oh, what happened?
I think moneyballing the midfield is exactly how you end up with the horseshoe of sadness, to be honest. And I think that that's the problem.
Sure,
is I think
but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I think that's been what the problem is. Now, look, if you want to be, you don't have to put on a tinfoil hat. Doyle read about this. I talked to him about it a little bit on Saturday. Like tinfoil hat is the Fire committed to is the reason the Fire are committed to a 4-4-2 because they're expecting to bring on another striker and then put Hugo in more of a second striker role, because he hasn't, the way that Hugo has been playing. I mean, he's just so good at so much what he does, but like he has been doing the first striker role of like he has to get on the end of things and finish them, but he's also been doing a lot of the stuff you expect a second striker to do, in terms of like being involved in the press and counter press, like all that stuff. And he's been very good at it because again, he's good at things. And it does make me wonder, like, is committing to this something about like giving guys time and experience with that? And we've seen coaches do that a lot of, I'm going to play the way that I think we're going to be playing, and I don't care if it's not the prettiest now because I want guys to get used to doing this. Having said that, I don't think that Robert Lewandowski, at any age, at any point of his career, radically changes the way the team plays. Will the team get more results with Robert Lewandowski than without? Like, of course. But I don't think that it solves the fundamental biggest problem here, which has not been a finisher or goal scoring, because Hugo Kuipers is the sole leader in the MLS Golden Boot race 1/3 of the way through the season.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Campbell kind of made that point in passing too. He's more saying, look, this could actually be a benefit for the Fire having to have had played this 4-4-2 so much as now you'll be more comfortable in it. I look, you're kind of, how do I phrase this? Not the whole what's the definition of insanity thing, doing the same thing over and over, like, but that's what it feels like, right? And look, like, again, back to kind of the original point made, like, you can say Pouso Ditajan is not a game breaker. He's shown that he is, right? Or he's shown that he has the ability to in specific moments, right? What he does really well is dribble in traffic and create dangerous moments, right? Now, and that's something the Fire lack. And
no,
sorry, just to wrap a bow on it, like, because we do have to move on. Like, what is Mauricio Pineda very good at doing? Playing like line breaking passes, seeing the passing lanes. What is Jay Davila bad at? That, right? Like, there is an aspect of what are you missing in this team? You have guys who can do it, even if they're a 75 overall instead of an 80. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels like.
Look, I'm not 100% sure that it's that simple to make those changes and expect it to work out.
Of course not, right?
No, look, I will say this. This is, maybe a good way to transition it. I think that if you're going to try it against a team, we'll talk about DC United's form and stuff like that. I think that they have been beneficiaries of the schedule a little bit and a little bit lucky some of the time. And I think that if you're going to see changes, this would be the time to do it. I also think that there's a good chance that if you don't see real changes, the Fire still get a result in this one. So, I mean, and I don't know, like, the problem is, does that become the data that you want to take with you of, like, and like, because like, I think that getting 180 minutes of tape over the next few days of like the Fire versus DC United and CF Montreal is like not going to tell us anything about what's working or not working with this team.
No, and a part of me does wonder if we're actually still riding the wave of a CF Montreal or of an SKC beatdown, right? But I mean, to that end, let's.
Well, I think that at this point you can't be, right. Like, that's a big question. Is like, what's the vibe in the locker room, right? And I think that this hopefully, and I think that I can say from having been in the locker room after the Cincinnati game, I think that the spirit felt different than it did against this. Like, nobody was looking broken or anything like that after this one, but I think that people were overall pretty happy with a lot of what they feel that they did and their teammates did in that one, but they knew that sometimes you don't get the result. It didn't feel like that after this one. It felt quieter, more somber. Like, it felt like guys were like having a oh crap moment of like a wake up call. And so I think we'll see if it was a wake up call, because clearly I think at this point, 3 losses in a row against all competitions and against teams that, like, the Fire, I think, have more talent than every single one of them.
Yeah. They should have been Look,
they were favored.
Should have been
3 games at home. Yeah. Like, they now, maybe Cincinnati is like, at some point, maybe like they were not as bad as they looked at the beginning of the year, and they'll figure things out, and it's not as big of a gap as the other two. But still, on the whole, 3 games at home, you'd think that you should win 2 of them, and that's not what happened. Now, we got to move on. That's after SKC. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about DC United coming up here now. Fire heading to the nation's capital to avenge an early loss to DC United. Scoring that final penalty Ty Baribo did in the 95th minute to hand Chicago their first loss at home of 2026. DC currently sitting 5th in the East on 16 points. That's only 1 point behind Chicago Fire, 4-4-4. Shout out Wendy's, 4-for-4, baby. But still with a negative goal differential, 15 goals, 17 allowed. Haven't lost in 2 months today, actually. As of recording, they have not lost in 2 months to the exact day since April 11th. It's an impressive run for Renee Weiler's team, who I'm not quite sure how they're doing it. You made the allusion, Tim, to the schedule. But look, to that end, it does feel like, look, final midweek game before the break for the Fire. We expect Mboazi to be starting again, right? We assume that he sat on Saturday so he could play on Wednesday. What are you looking at kind of high level for the Fire will need to do to win this game?
I'm just stuck on Erkut Sorgut's LinkedIn post still. So no, I think they just need to. They can't make the defensive mistakes that we saw in that one, right? Like, they can't leave that much space in dangerous areas of the pitch, and they have to just be more confident in possession. And like the thing we didn't talk about in the last game was, Bamba had an early goal that was called offside. It was offside, like it was 100% the right call. They had to take a look at it. It wasn't offside by a lot, and I think that Bamba could have been on and it wouldn't have affected any part of the play, really. It still doesn't count, but I think that you need to see more of that kind of movement. And from Bamba, I think that Dijon can do it. I think that's going to be a question of, like, if you've got two guys that can sort of do the same thing, and one is a 20-year-old who's never really done it, and when you're paying $5.5 million a year, like, how do you manage that? And, I would like to see more Poussa de Dijon. I don't know if this is a game for him to start, but I wouldn't be surprised if he started one of the two.
Yeah, I could see Poussa starting. Ironically, I could actually, his natural side is the right, so I wouldn't be shocked to see Philip Zinkernagel get some rest, and or moving to more of that 4-3-3 we saw early in the year. I saw Robin Ludd is back in training for what it's worth, sporting a face mask per good friend of the show, Joe Chats. So TBD on if Robin will actually feature in this game. I doubt it. But
I would be surprised if he's. I think that he's back training with the group. I think that it's probably with stuff that you do in training, but you wouldn't trust someone with a face mask this early after to be in a game situation where not everyone's ultimately on the same team as you.
Yes, it's very different when it's a contact sport and not kicking the ball around. But yeah, I could see either resting Philip Zinkernagel or playing him inside, giving Marin Haile Selassie some rest. I hope we see the Fire go back to a 4-3-3. I think I agree with you generally, Tim, in the point about no defensive mistakes. I think realistically, you need to score goals. This is not a team that you should be struggling to score against. No disrespect to Rene Weiler, and that is, I think, kind of what he's trying to do, but they haven't exactly not given up goals in this. Like they're averaging almost 2 goals a game against.
Yeah, and despite that, I still think that defensively they're probably a little bit closer to where they want to be than they need to be offensively, because they've been getting some goals, but I just haven't been that convinced with the way that they've been getting them. Man, like, I don't know if you've watched any of the recent stuff, like Luis Montino, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his name. I don't know. Like, he's what, like Hungarian?
Like
his name seems like it's French and some, like, are you Louis? Are you Louis? Like, I don't know, dude. But he is the team record signing in DC United. It's a very weird team record signing. Like, he doesn't, like, when Hugo Kuipers came into the league, like, Belgian Golden Boot winner, like, that's a guy that has a pedigree that you're like, that should be a team's record signing. Montino didn't really have that as much. He's looked like a good player. He only
played in the, like, he played in like the Romanian top flight. I don't think he ever actually left Romania before this.
And he's Romanian, not Hungarian. My bad. So yeah, he was stuck in in Romania. Now he's 23, turning 24 next month. So, like, it's not like he's like, it's that unusual for a guy to stick around his home country much longer than that. But it's, and I think he was in Fiorentina's academy for a while too. Remembering the research I did 2 months ago, which seems like a million years ago.
Yeah, right.
So, like, it's not like he spent his entire life there, but it, I mean, it's a weird place to be shopping for your team record signing in MLS in 2026. But he's looked pretty good lately. Like, at first he looked like a total flop, and now he looks pretty good. Maybe not $7 million transfer fee good, but like a good MLS player, a player that can be dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing,
signing DPs in this economy.
They've had 3 straight draws after a 4-0 win against Dallas.
No, they didn't.
Am I not looking
they
at?
They beat NYCFC the week prior to tying Nashville 2-2.
What am I looking at here?
I have no idea.
Okay. Oh, so, you know what? This is my fault. My dumb self is sitting here. I was looking at Ty Baribo's minutes played because he didn't play on Saturday, and so because he didn't play, it doesn't show up, right?
Yep.
But they're coming off, a 2-2 draw with Nashville SC, which, look, it's an impressive result. I can't say the Fire winning 1-0 is impressive, and I mean, albeit they blew a late lead, like, it's still an impressive result for DC United. And this has been a weird year for the Eastern Conference. It does feel like they are that right with New England, right? That other team that's kind of, we've been on the outside. We're trying to crack our way in now.
So it's worth saying that the Nashville SC team they faced had played Tigres in El Volcán midweek. And so just pretend that we said the thing that we have to say legally about altitude. So it's not like it was like a fresh leg, Nashville SC team. Like Nashville had played one of the toughest games that MLS teams ever get to play in the middle of the week, and they lost, but they didn't look terrible in the loss. They like stuck around and played it. I'm just saying it's not like they subbed guys off in the 60th minute being like, well, it's, we're down 8-0 and that's it. Like it was a 1-0 loss. And so tying Nashville, like still full credit because I think that they're a very deep squad, but like it's not like it was Nashville with 100% of their attention and focus having been on the game all week.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's turn our attention back to who the Fire, the Fire, we'll just say that. One of the key pieces I mentioned before, we expect Mbazeli and Boazi to start. We talked about Pouso de Tejan. I'm wondering, as you look at the 11 for what Saturday will be, if there's another name that jumps out to you, like I'd really like to see this guy on the field, especially given you expect some rotation in the next 2 games, although who knows at this point, right?
Look, I am really sticking my neck out here, and I feel like I could get... I don't think that Jonathan Dean has had the best game. And I think that one of the limitations that we kind of know about Jonathan Dean is he can get forward, but he does, it's a lot more like burst of speed, vertical running. He's not going to give you as much in offense as Leo Barroso does when he's healthy. And frankly, I think as much as a converted winger like Dylan Borso does. And I honestly would be interested in seeing maybe not a start because that would be a big leap, but a planned halftime sub or something like that with Dylan Borso on, or a start for Dylan Borso with a planned sub 45 minutes off.
That's what I was going to say is look, I said this on in the preview. I wanted Dylan Borso to start against Red Bull. His speed going forward would be very important to have because Red Bull doesn't have the strongest, fastest back line, and like I think he would have been really effective. I was disappointed that we didn't get to see him at all.
Tim Parker, who's almost my age, is not the most mobile defender in the league?
No, I am not. I would never. But no, it's like, look, I love Jonathan Dean. I do think his best use in MLS is probably as like the veteran third fullback who can just hop into a game, give you 40, if you need it, 30, 20, however many minutes of good defensive soccer, and then also be a little bit of a threat going forward and make some nice passes, really. Like,
and like
what Dylan Borso...
when he was signed, when he was signed, he was never supposed to be a guy that you'd see in the starting 11. Man. Like, you never were supposed to see him in the starting 11 and think, I'm completely comfortable with that. And that is, he's done that for a couple of years now with the Fire, which is to his credit.
The caveat I'll give to is I am comfortable with Jonathan Dean being in the 11. I don't worry when I see his name.
Everyone is. No one around the Fire does. That was not the expectation when he was signed. If you like, I think the expectation when he was signed is like
I assume he'd be gone when Greg came in. Truly, I didn't think he was going to get a contract extension, and he earned it to his credit. But no, he's done nothing but beat expectations and just giving that. But like, he didn't have a strong game. And again, when what you said, I think is 100% true. The Fire need to score the first goal. Like, it's just, they needed to in the last one. They need to in this one. And so to some extent, if you got a guy that can give you a better chance of doing that, who's young and has energy and maybe a little bit of something to prove at a time when like the team just, it was not on. It like really was not on. Yeah.
On Saturday, then give a guy who's young and hungry and has to prove that he has to earn every single minute he's on the pitch still. Not that like I think Dean is taking anything for granted and earning you that, but like Borso's going to be hungry and he's going to have something to prove. Does that mean he could fly forward and completely forget that he's not a winger anymore and forget that he's got to play defense? Of course. Sure, it can do that. But like the Fire need a goal, and that's important, right?
The other thing I mentioned on last week, and obviously you weren't here, like, is if Leo Barroso is going to just not play anymore, which, look, it's an injury. Nobody's like, I'm not criticizing him for being injured. If he's going to continue to have these availability issues, I would like Dylan Borso to start a couple games here. I want to see what you have. Because, look, Leo Barroso is obviously the best right back on the team. He's also taking a U22 spot. And if he's going to play less than 20 games every year, you have to have a very difficult conversation. Like, I think I believe in him maybe more than anybody else. I've said multiple times he is the highest ceiling of any player on this team. So to me, it's like, I would like to see Dylan Borso play because I think he is a similar value when you account for contract, if that makes sense.
No, right. It's all upside with him, and he, I think that the question is how comfortable he's gotten playing some of the defensive parts of the fullback role. And, if Ty Barubo is he's working his way back from injury himself, and if he's like going to be fully healthy, because I think that maybe changes your equation of what you need on defense a little bit. It's very, okay, this is going to sound, just zooming out for a second, because I think maybe that's important to do. I was not expecting that Fire versus DC United at a third of the way through the season was going to be a battle for the team that would have a home field advantage in the playoff spot if the playoffs started after that one.
Yeah.
Like, that was not in my car, but that's where we are.
But let's zoom back in, because now you have to think about if you gave Cincinnati 4 points, you've already given 3 to DC, right? You lose this game, that's a 6-point swing for DC United, and you are, pardon my language here, screwing yourself in the table.
Yeah, and yeah, that's a little bit true, but I think that there's still plenty of points to be had over the rest of the table. I mean, look, the Revs are not going to finish in second. Who
knows?
Yeah,
and if they did, Caleb Porter wouldn't be impressed.
Well, yeah, thankfully, because I don't think he was, even when he was coaching the team. But shout out to Marko Mitrovic, unofficial friend of the pod. My point is, look, this isn't finishing after 14 games at the World Cup break with 17 points is not great. It doesn't put you out of the running for anything, and you've got time to make adjustments. And I think that there's a good chance that there's points to be had over the next time, over the next 3 games. There's probably points here. CF Montreal, you have to feel pretty good about, although I guess who knows sometimes. And Toronto is a team that is barely has enough healthy players to make an MLS roster. So
they almost beat San Jose.
Yeah, and I mean they didn't look terrible against Inter Miami after losing to Atletico Ottawa of the Canadian Premier League in the middle of the week. And not even close. It was a 3-1, and Toronto was not really showing up to play, and they were playing as close to their starters as they reasonably had. I don't know, maybe not quite, but still. In any case, look, I think that my point about this big picture is, I think to a certain extent, Greg has said, as every coach is, we try to win every game. We're we focused on the game ahead of us, blah, blah, blah. I think a little bit of what you want to do is you want to get some tape on some guys and give yourself some stuff to think about when you've got several, a month and a half in the middle of a season, which never happens, to think about making adjustments. So some more tape on Dylan Borso would be useful. Some more tape on Poussa Dejan would be useful. Some 2026 tape of Sergio Orahel at minutes that are not in the last 15 minutes of a game would be useful.
That was my last thing I want to end on is I think not starting Sergio Orahel in one of these 2 games is about as close to malpractice as you can be right now. The midfield hasn't been good all year. It hasn't, right? Even when the team was winning, it wasn't winning because of the midfield. I mean, it was in part winning because Anton Saletros was playing really well, but it wasn't really the midfield as a whole. And look, if nothing else, to your point about getting minutes on these guys, I feel confident. There is a team in MLS, there has to be at least one, that would say, hey, we'll take that guy on loan for 6 months so you can create some roster space. He's an American. He's not making a lot of money. He's a serviceable MLS player. If you really needed to open a roster spot, that's a place you can do it without having to worry about, are we selling somebody too low, right? And I wouldn't say the same about Mauricio Pineda, though I would like to see him start in this game because, frankly, I don't see how you can just continue to blindly start Shea Davila, and I don't think Greg is doing it blindly per se, more just I don't see how you can just keep trotting him out there. He's not playing well. He needs to sit.
Especially,
he needs to get his head
young
back.
Player, I think that's for not as a punishment, but just because,
No, just
having
it's
a
for
guy
him, honestly.
Having a guy in a rut keep on spinning his tires and just making the rut go deeper is not going to help anybody. And I agree with that. Now, I who knows? Like, midweek is probably not the time to trot out a new formation, right? Like, but when you've had like a couple days to do it, the team's practice stuff, it does make me wonder if going to a 3-5-2 and playing it very differently than what the Fire did last year could make sense, right? I mean, because then you're
Sam Rogers is healthy again, right? Like you have the depth for it.
Yep, and I think that Joel Waterman, I think, was not put in his best light in that last game, but I think that playing in a 3-5-2, maybe it would put him a little bit more. And look, one of the things that can make a 3-5-2 work is if one of your center backs sort of works as a quasi midfielder, like we've seen Jack Elliott do it. But I mean, the other version of that is like, dude, Embo Ozzy just carries the ball up the pitch and shoots it from like 45 yards out.
Yeah,
and we've seen him do that too. So there's maybe something there. I don't know if we see it midweek. I mean, I would hope that if we're not having a very different conversation about where the Fire are at after these two games, and I mean, the Fire won't really be at a different, whatever happens in the next two games, maybe it's a tailspin. If it's bad losses in the two, I think then it is a conversation. I don't think wins really change that much of the way that you feel about the team overall, right? Or draws.
No.
I don't think it does. But
yeah.
I think that if we don't see those results, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because this team isn't, it's going to sound dumb, this team isn't judged on wins in May, right? This is a team that's supposed to compete in November. So it's more about repeatable performances.
Jumping ahead a little bit, like they're not going to be judged on a win against CF Montreal. Like, it was cool to get one, down by a guy and you can like hang your hat on that and whatever. But like in the end, like, you're supposed to get 6 points against CF Montreal in 2026, and the Fire have gotten 3, and so that's great for them. And like,
you're halfway there.
But yeah, you're halfway there. But if it's a 5-0 win over CF Montreal, like, it doesn't, you're not like, oh wow, like the Fire are so bad. It doesn't really change the math that much.
It's so the old thing. We say it all the time, right? A 1-0 win can be better than a 5-0 win in a game like that.
I'm just saying that, like, the DC United game, I mean, who knows? Like, DC looked better than we thought they were a little bit, I think, but I still think that's a game you expect to win even on the road. But CF Montreal especially is like, they're both kind of games where the Fire can lose a lot more than they can win, if that's a good summary of it.
100%. Well, look, Tim, that brings us to the portion of the show where the question is asked, because I need to ask you the question. It's the question that we are constantly questioning. Tim, looking at Wednesday, DC United in DC, who's your spark and who you got?
I really just want to like punt on this, be like 2-1. I'm not going to say any more than that. 2-1, that the spark is the indomitable human spirit. But I'm going to say, you know what? And I honestly don't know if it'll be a 2-1 margin, but 2-1, and you know what? Maybe Embo Ozzy, right? Like, he's had a game off. Let's see if he gets back in and locked in. And if this gets us the Embo Ozzy that's shown us all the things that he can do, and maybe a little bit less of the things that we don't want to be seeing from him, where skilled players can catch you out on it. Because Ty Baribo is a guy like that. Montano may be a guy like that. I'm not 100% sold on that yet, but like, DC doesn't have a lot of guys like that, but they do have at least one.
Yeah. I gotta be honest, man. I just see this as a loss. I see this as a 2-0 loss. I have this feeling in the pit of my stomach that Greg is going to roll out the exact same lineup, save Mboazi. And it's just going to be like a 2-0 game. It's just going to be maybe Montano is that guy. Maybe Ty Baribo plays a little more than we would expect him to, and they just find a couple goals. Maybe I'm being a little reactionary right now. I probably am, but I don't see. I have not yet seen all year, really, even in the wins, the mindset that you need to win a game like this, because as much as we don't believe in DC as a team, they believe in themselves. They're playing good soccer. And look, this is the league where on any given day, any team not named Sporting Kansas City can beat any other team, right? If that
happens, John, a little perspective. Wear gratitude like a cloak, and it will feed every corner of your life. That's from Urquhart Sogut's most recent LinkedIn post.
That's a good saying, honestly. I gotta get that's a bar. Better than, well, I thought we played really well. Sorry. No, I think if there is a spark, though, if the Fire are to pull off a win, I could see it being Dylan Borso. Look, one thing he did really well against Columbus that we haven't seen anybody else do effectively is hunt those big switches, right? It was calling for it all day on Saturday. The Fire never took advantage, in part because that's just not what Jonathan Dean does well. And so I think if we see serious minutes from Dylan Borso, he could pick apart a game like that, really open up the field, get Jonathan Bamba in space, and that's where you could see the team be dangerous again. But that's obviously depending on a lot of things.
Yeah, it could be, right? Like, I mean, I think that we're going to learn something about the mindset of this team on Wednesday. Not necessarily about the talent or the tactics or that much. I think we're going to learn something about where their heart is in all of this, and we'll just take it from there.
And maybe I'll end it on this. Maybe the Robert Lewandowski saga is kind of a window into the mindset of this front office of you go sign a real game-changing number 10, and then Andre Franco has to compete with him. This is maybe the best team in MLS, and it doesn't look like they're going to do that. And said they're big name hunting a striker when they have the best striker in MLS. Who knows? Just thought it was worth mentioning as you said that. Last but not least, thanks again for tuning in. As always, we truly appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. It's very nice to see those numbers consistently move up and to the right as we look at the charts. So it does mean a lot from that perspective. As always, you can stay tuned to menofred97.com. That's where you'll stay tuned to all the news, analysis, breaking and otherwise, including any kind of updates that we have on the team. We'll have them there first, menofred97.com. You can keep your eyes peeled on the social media as well, menofred97 anywhere and everywhere that matters. Wherever that may be, and wherever you're listening to this, if you go ahead and like, share, subscribe, rate, all that kind of stuff, it does go a long way in terms of growing the reach, growing the audience. So we do appreciate the assist there. I suppose that just about does it here. Hopefully we'll be back later this week celebrating a Chicago Fire victory. And if not, we'll certainly have some more to talk about. So for Tim, for our illustrious producer, Austin, I'm John. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire, and come on, you men in red.